Our special guest today, appearing all the way from Alaska, Jeannie Sato, Stacy, Marz. I saw your presentation. I think Chief Justice Bacon saw some of your presentation, or all of your presentation as well, at the Equal Access to Justice Conference in Minneapolis. You all are doing incredible work, and so we are very excited to have you. Grace Spulach, who originally set this up, I don't know, 6 months or more ago, was very excited to have you as well. Grace has moved on, as you all may know, but we are thrilled to have you here today. And without further ado, I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves and then get started, since that's why we're here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for the invitation. I really love New Mexico, so this is a treat for me. I wish I could be there in person, because I had a fantastic visit there last year, where the Western Conference of Chief Justices and State Court Administrators was lucky enough to meet in Santa Fe, and then I took some extra time with my husband, and we did some hiking and got to enjoy some fantastic food. And I have some art on my wall right now that I bought there. And it's just, I thought, I think I might want to live here when I retire. This place is amazing. So I love New Mexico. But we'll talk about what we've been doing here in Alaska, and hopefully it can inspire maybe some of what you all are going to be doing in New Mexico with remote self-help, because I honestly think that if I had all the money in the world, I'd still do what we do here, because I think it's the best way to do it. Just to give you a tiny bit of background about myself, and then I'll turn it over to Jeannie to introduce herself. And then we actually have a presentation. So I'm hoping that somebody can screen share with Jeannie so that she can show the presentation. But I am the administrative director of the Alaska court system. So the job that I have is what Artie Pepin has in New Mexico, and what John Grecian had at some time in the past as well. And I oversee the statewide operations of our court system. We have 40 courts that are located throughout the state, most of which are not on the road system, which you'll see a little bit more in our presentation. So we have a lot of rural courts. We have some urban courts, and then we have some kind of middle-sized courts in between. And my background and my passion is access to justice. So I've been in this position for about 2.5 years. But for the 16 years before that, I had Jeannie's job, and she'll tell you a little bit about that. But what I did was I oversaw our self-help programs and our access to justice initiatives, language access, alternative dispute resolution. And so that's kind of where my heart is. And that's why I wanted to become the administrative director, because I wanted to take that kind of ethos and bring it to our state system at large, because I think the business of the courts is access to justice, and it's not just a sideshow. And I think that all the decisions that we make in court operations should be through that lens. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm looking forward to sharing with you kind of the origin of our self-help program. And then I'm going to start out the presentation and talk about kind of where it started and some of the decisions that were made. And then we're going to I'm going to turn over to Jeannie, and she's going to talk about some of the kind of developments and some of the new things that have happened under her leadership. And so I'm going to turn over to Jeannie now.
Thanks. I'm Jeannie Sato, and I'm currently the Director of Access to Justice Services for the Alaska court system. And I'm actually in this meeting 2 places. I'm remote this week because of a COVID exposure. So I joined from my iPad so we could see each other, but I also joined remotely from my work computer where I can screen share. So I think someone made my iPad a co-host. There should be another J Sato or Jeannie Sato somewhere. If that one could be a co-host, that's where the screen share will come from. I've been in this position about 2.5 years since Stacy Marz became administrative director. And she sort of mentioned the things she was doing. And since I took over, the administrative director, who has a focus on access to justice, has, we used to be self-help services, and she's expanded this role to access to justice services so that a lot of different parts of the court could be under our umbrella, to really highlight to the public in the court that access to justice is the lens through which we want to see a lot of things. So we are still self-help services and language access, and dispute resolution. But now under Access to Justice is also forms. And we've added a group of staff dispute resolution professionals, who are mental health professionals, to help out. We've also added, I'll talk about a new guardianship self-help line, and a new tech person who's just Access to Justice technology. And also the state jury office, I supervise the person who runs that, because for a lot of people, their only interaction with the court is as a juror. And we want to make sure they're getting excellent customer service and feeling that the court is a place where they can get access to justice. Before that, I was 14 years in private practice as a family law attorney, mediator, and parenting coordinator, and collaborative attorney. And before that, I was part-time. I did public defense work and then clerked for the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals. So I'm gonna just see, I gotta switch to my other screen, and I think I'm gonna be able to screen share, I hope. And I'll send our presentation. Can everyone see that okay? I can see it on my other screen, so I'm assuming that everyone else can.
I can see it.
So, yeah, so I'll let Stacy start out with these beginning screens, and I'll be back in a minute.
All right, so Jeannie, if you want to go to our next slide. Okay, great. So the reason that we started our services in the self-help program was in 2000, we started in 2001. So we were kind of one of the early statewide programs. I think at that time, the main other statewide program was California, who actually gave us a lot of help in the early days. I actually didn't start at the Self-Help Center until 2003. So Catherine Alternator, who some of you may know from her incredible work with the Self-Represented Litigation Network, started the Self-Help Center while she was an Alaska court system employee. And then I came on in 2003 and I started to job share with Catherine. She and I had job shared as Alaska legal services attorneys prior to that. So we had a history of working well together. But the decisions were made that we would have a statewide self-help center that would be centralized in Anchorage, but would serve the entire statewide population remotely through the telephone. And we weren't going to have in-person services. And the reason why was not unlike any other court, but like every other court, pretty much, we had been seeing an increasing number of self-represented litigants, primarily in family law cases. And they were taking kind of an inordinate amount of time by our customer service staff and showing up in courtrooms, confused, not knowing what to do. And so really the focus was to help self-represented folks understand how to navigate their court cases by teaching them about court procedure and what their options were to move their cases forward, and share with them appropriate forms to handle what they were interested in taking care of. And the goal was to not only help them, but to help court staff who were otherwise trying to help them. And the idea was to have these specialists that were really good at helping people provide exceptional customer service and help ask the appropriate questions and take away some of that tension that judges may feel in trying to explain court procedure and not feeling like they wanted to kind of step over that line by crossing the line and advising folks that are self-represented about how to do certain things. The idea was that if we had very well-trained court staff to do that, then there was a place to direct them from other parts of the court system to take care of their business. And we were seeing about 75% of our cases involving self-represented, and that's still true. And that's kind of a national statistic that's generally true. And part of the reason why we made this decision is if you look at our state, we're a very large geographic state, and we're very spread out. So we have some places with fairly dense populations, but we have a lot of places that have relatively small populations. And if they have a court location, they don't have a very large caseload. So we have some courts that have very small caseloads. It kind of depends on around the state, but there's no way that we would have been able to put a physical self-help center in every court location. It just wouldn't be justified based on the caseloads. So we made the decision that it would be a lot more efficient and cost effective to have one self-help center that could help everybody. Okay, Jeannie, if you could move on, that would be great. So these two maps compare our court locations and our roads. So the map on the left, every dot is a court location. And on the right, the red is basically where we have roads that connect communities. So people don't believe this, but we actually have, most of our communities are not connected to each other by roads. There may be some roads within the community, but you can't drive to the community from another community. So much of Alaska is only accessible by plane, by boat in the winter, in the summer by boat, in the winter by snow machine, over our rivers freeze and they become ice roads. But ordinarily, like the kind of transportation that people are used to, because I hear a lot of courts say, outside of Alaska, things are really spread apart. It might take like 2 hours to drive to another court. We have very few courts that you can even drive to. So that's one of our large challenges, is how do you serve a state? And the obvious answer, and it's probably not that surprising after COVID, is remote services. So we've been doing remote services forever because practically it is the only way we can do services. So the decision was made that we were going to do self-help services because people literally cannot drive to most court locations. All right, next slide. Okay, I am going to talk to you about kind of what I see the maturity model of self-help services. And so the foundation, I think, of self-help services is the static content. And by static, I only mean that it's static in that you can't interact with it two ways, but it's not static in that it never changes. So forms and web page content, self-help web page content, and plain language forms and plain language written web page content, I think, are critical foundations for how to provide self-help, because it's kind of like the Bible of information that the next level, which is facilitated self-help services, uses to be able to interact with the customers to help them understand how to navigate their court cases and understand what options may exist procedurally if there are more than one, as well as forms, which would be appropriate to use. And so the first step I think any system really needs to do is make sure that they have good forms and content. And number 1 and 2, the static content and the facilitated self-help, where you actually have humans interacting with your customers, is kind of a dynamic feedback loop, because the information that you learn through the customer interactions when you're facilitating them is information that you can use to develop more forms and more website content and to really fine tune that information. So that's kind of a constant feedback loop, which is really helpful. And that's why, like Jeannie mentioned, I moved forms under self-help or under the Access to Justice Department to even make that connection kind of more tight, so that that learning that happens through how our people that interact with self-represented litigants can be translated into how our forms are created and the content that we put on the website. And then the third level in the maturity model is what we're calling court-based resolutions. So Jeannie's going to talk a bit about a program we have called the Early Resolution Program, but that's where we are triaging cases, or the self-help department is triaging cases to determine what case could resolve with assistance, either by a mediator, volunteer attorneys on both sides, or a settlement judge to help parties resolve by agreement. So they're actually identifying cases, working with the appropriate service provider, either mediator, lawyer, or judge, to provide information to help facilitate that resolution, and have forms particularly designed for that with pre-filled information, so that this can all happen basically in one hearing, kind of one-stop shop where the parties appear, work with the appropriate professional, and then 80% get agreement within that hearing. So that's kind of like a higher level of services that self-help can provide. but it's usually not the place where you would start, because I think you need the other things under your foundation before you can get to that place. Okay, next slide, please. So the Family Law Self-Help Center was and is really the core service that we provide to the family law customers. And it is a phone line that is available to basically anybody in the world. And so we also have a large military population. So we've had calls from military bases all over the world. As long as their case is in Alaska, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if a family also often, breaks up and then one member of the family leaves the state, then we still help those folks. So we help people from all over the country, as well as, of course, all over Alaska. And the goal is really to provide them with customized information for their particular problem that they're facing based on the information that they share with the facilitator, and then they help guide them through next steps in their case and what forms they could use. And they also provide non-legal information, so social services or practical help, depending on the information that the customer provides. So this is just one of our very long-term facilitators, Ursula. While she is on the phone, all of our facilitators walk around with headsets. They're kind of multitasking, doing different things, but they're on the phone much of the time, while they're also on the website, usually co-navigating, co-browsing with their caller to try to show them how to find information themselves for maybe the next time if they might be able to help themselves. Next slide. So the structure that we have set up that has worked really well is that we don't meet with anybody in the office. So all the services are remote, and that is to be able to provide kind of equal opportunity for all customers, regardless of where they're located. So we're physically located in Anchorage, which is the largest court, which accounts for about half of the state's filings, but we don't see customers in the office. We also don't have an office that has any kind of security. We're in our own building, separate from the courthouse. So practically that wouldn't work either. We have a telephone helpline that has a toll-free number. I think that toll-free number has actually become a lot less important now that everybody has cell phones. And I don't think toll calls matter, but we have both toll calls and non-toll calls available. We have the ability for people to make appointments and have follow-up by email, particularly important after they've called us the first time. So the first time they call in and they didn't have an appointment, but after that time they can make appointments anytime in the future. And then there is a dedicated website for family law self-help, and it has a ton of frequently asked questions and information, and all of it's been fine-tuned based on feedback that the customers have provided to our facilitators over time. And that is very flexible because it becomes updated less now, but in the early days, it was frequently updated based on what we were learning. So that feedback loop was really, really important. And then we have been teaching classes for many years. And the first one is family law education. And that is been court ordered in our largest court, but now it's actually available statewide. Jeannie could talk more about that. But that is basically once the case is filed, all separate self-represented people are ordered in. It's also opt-in. Anybody who wants to can come. And it used to be in person. Then, of course, during the pandemic, we shifted it to Zoom, and then we made it accessible around the state. So the more remote services using technology we have, the more we can make them accessible regardless of where you're located. And then the second class that we offer is hearing and trial preparation class. And that's literally the nuts and bolts of how to be in court, what to expect, how to call witnesses, how to question witnesses, how to introduce evidence, how to mark evidence, all the mechanics of being in court. And then finally, we have self-help computer workstations in courts for those who may not have computers if they wanted to look things up on the internet or print out materials that's available to them. Okay, next slide. And the family law phone line has been focusing primarily on the domestic relations caseload. So they handle every aspect of that and every issue within that. And then there's such an overlap with domestic violence and protective orders that we've always been talking to folks about domestic violence, and that comes up quite a bit, whether they're seeking protective orders or not. We're also a resource for that. And then finally, other things that are kind of come up a lot, we provide information and forms help with step-parent adoption, name changes, emancipation, powers of attorney, and guardianship. And that's been a long history. And now we've just also added specific focus on guardianship through a grant that we were able to open up a separate phone line and hire separate staff to deal with guardianship specifically. Our staff are incredibly helpful and resourceful. So they basically handle questions about everything, and some courts and some judges, no matter what the case type is, send people, and they do their best to help. And luckily we have really good self-help resources for many case types, which we'll show you in a minute. So again, that's kind of the foundational piece, because they can kind of help anybody based on our website content. We have really tried to focus family law because that's the highest need area, but they do end up helping people with many, many other areas. I should also mention that one of the things that's really important is that we try to hold each individual call to like 15 to 20 minutes, just because the volume is great. So we always, at the end of every call, try to wrap it up with a task that the person can walk away with, either that we have shared with them that they could immediately do, or more information that they need to get. And then we can set up another appointment if we need to end the call after 15 or 20 minutes. But we, as you could imagine, some people are really high needs and they could talk to us for, 2-3 more hours, but that wouldn't be very equitable and wouldn't allow us to serve as many people. So we really try to keep those calls to about 15 to 20 minutes, and that's about what they actually average. All right, next one. And I can't remember, Jeannie, was this where we were going to switch off, or remind me? Sorry.
Yeah. I think my first one was the picture of the survey. So I think not yet.
Okay, perfect. Okay, good. All right. So we've always put a priority on providing multilingual facilitated services. Right now we have English and Spanish. We've historically had other languages, but due to turnover recently, we've provided Tagalog until very recently, but we had a staff change, so we haven't been able to provide that. But we use interpreters for all other languages. So it's not just you can only speak with us in English or Spanish. We bring in interpreters either through the language line if it's an immediate need, or we schedule an interpreter to remote in with us if it's something that we have an appointment set for. And our hours have been 7:30 to 5, which is a little bit longer than the court hours. Our normal business hours are 8 to 4:30. There's been times when we've allowed our facilitators to work till 6, but when in looking at when the calls actually come in, there's been fewer calls that come in between 5 and 6. So we've, during the pandemic, have cut back. One thing that I apologize, I'm actually getting over COVID. So my cough is greatly improved, but it still comes up every once in a while in the last few days. It may be surprising that we don't permit voicemail on our helpline. And the reason why we don't is because it has proven to take so long to call people back that we actually had our service delivery numbers decline when we've done a 6-month experiment where we did allow voicemail on the helpline, because so many people wouldn't answer their phone, or wouldn't have their voicemail set up, or wouldn't be at that location. So we decided to have no voicemail because we actually can serve more people. However, once the caller gets through and they speak with a facilitator, they get their direct phone number and email address, and they can leave voicemail on that, and they can call them, at any time and expect a call back. So at the beginning of every call, we give a caution about the limitations of the self-help services. And the big thing that we want to get across is that we don't give legal advice, but we give legal information about procedure and forms, because we want to make sure that they have the same expectations that we do in what that interaction will be all about. We will co-browse the website with them if possible, and many people can get online at the same time as the conversation. And so we're using it as an educative opportunity for them to understand the structure of the website and the kind of information available, so that if at another time when they weren't speaking with us, they could learn themselves. And like I mentioned, the average call is about 15 to 20 minutes. If they can't download information by email, we will send things to them in snail mail. It's just become a rare event that people need that service, and it's slow and people want everything now. So not many people need that, but there are occasional people, and depending on location, and some of our more elderly folks may prefer that method. So we definitely offer that. And now during the pandemic, when everybody moved to Zoom, we also offer Zoom calls to be able to screen share information with folks if they want to do that. And next slide. Yeah. So this is the caution that we give people at the beginning of every call. And we just want to kind of drill it into their heads so that they understand. And we say the Family Law Self-Help Center is part of the Alaska court system, and we provide legal information, not legal advice. We can give you information about forms or procedure, but not advice or strategy on interpreting the law. Conversations with us are not confidential in the way they would be with an attorney. We help both sides. So if the other party calls us, we would give them the same kind of help we are giving you. We don't share information with the other side. I'll make that clear as well. And is this okay with you? And we ask if they have an attorney representing them, because if they do, we want to understand what that representation agreement is. Is it an unbundled arrangement where they're calling us about the matter that they're representing themselves in, or are they calling us because they want to double check their attorney? And if it's the latter, we usually say we really prefer that you talk to your attorney, because they may have more complete information and strategy for your case that we don't have. So we really recommend that you talk to your attorney about the issues that they're representing you on, as opposed to us. We can give them general information, but we don't want to get sideways with their attorney. Okay, next one. So the way the structure of the call is that comes in through our helpline is they're going to do kind of a mini intake. And in the beginning of the training of a new facilitator, it's a little bit more formal. And then with our very experienced facilitators, it's just kind of very as natural as breathing to them. So they don't use any forms or anything, but they're basically trying to identify procedurally where in the case the caller is. What phase? Is it a brand new case that they have yet to file? Has somebody already filed something and they need to respond? Has the case been ongoing and they need to ask something of the judge, like a motion where they need an order? Do they have a physical court appearance or a remote court appearance, a hearing or a trial that they need to get ready for? Has the case already been finalized and they need to ask for something post-judgment? So that's really something that we're trying to understand, because that's usually something that they can tell us. They usually can identify, if asked the question, where they are in the case. They may not always be able to coherently tell us exactly what they want, but through the questions that our facilitators ask, and they do ask them, like, what do you need right now? What do you want to happen? We don't require them to talk to us in legalese at all. We don't talk to them in legalese at all. But we're really trying to understand what is the step that they need to take and how do we help them best do that. We're going to ask them what the court is that they're filing in, if they know. And that helps us to understand if there's any local practices, because our staff is comfortable and familiar with what's going on kind of throughout the state, because they, interact with all of our courts statewide, and they listen to proceedings, they review filings around the state. So they have a pretty good handle on that. They will provide the options for forms if something needs to be filed, and information about how they can follow up if they need further assistance. Then we will distribute whatever information we have by the method that the caller wants. We usually provide a follow-up email in writing so that they have the information again that they might have just learned over the phone. And we also provide the legal and non-legal referrals. So I firmly believe that legal issues rarely happen in isolation, and that they usually coexist with some kind of other issues like social service problems, homelessness, poverty, domestic violence, a whole array of challenges. And so it's often really helpful if we could help them address what those other underlying problems are and provide resources to that. So we have great resource lists for our various communities, depending on what the need is. And then the very last thing we do with every call is a quick demographic survey, and we record the tasks that we completed so that it helps us learn what the needs are of the customers are and what more we need to do as a program to make changes. And also the demographic survey helps us to understand who we're talking to and where do we need to do more outreach if we feel like certain kinds of populations we're not reaching. So I very much think the survey is really important. And when I've talked to some other programs, they are like, oh, that takes too much time. I have to tell you, it takes like less than a minute, because the demographic survey part of it, we often don't even have to ask them any questions because a lot of the information they've provided us in the context of the call. So we have multiple screens on our computer workstations for our facilitators, and they always have the survey open while they're talking to the customer. And so as they learn information, they just, put that information into the survey. So are you married? Are you an unmarried parent? How many children do you have? Where do you live? There's those kind of questions they often learn. They might learn just from the context of the call if they are employed or if they're not employed, or if they're a member of a tribe, or if they're a member of the military. So some of the things that we're interested in knowing, a lot of that information they get. And then when it's time to do the survey, they just fill in with the questions that they may not have had answers to during the course of the call. And then recording the tasks done, they know how they help them. So they check the boxes about the kinds of questions they answered and the kinds of information they provided. So the survey really isn't very onerous. And then Jeannie, and it used to be me, would get a monthly survey result for each of my staff, and then an aggregate one for all of them, which would provide all the information that we learned that month from the survey. All right, next one. And I'm going to send it to Jeannie. Okay, thanks everyone.
So this is one of the changes that happened since Stacy left, in that they had a survey built into our computer network program that was no longer supported. So we moved the survey to SurveyMonkey, and this is just a couple of the pages, and it the facilitators can get it pretty much on one screen if it's small enough, and just like Stacy said, click down. And with SurveyMonkey, we can also get a report each month that shows the different facilitators and all the data that's come in that month. One of the things it says here that influence the information on what people are asking for can influence new forms and web page content. And one of the things that's been most interesting for me to learn about is this part of self-help. I was in private practice for 14 years, and I looked at the court webpage all the time for information. And I used the court forms all the time, or sometimes people would come in for unbundled legal services, and I would show them these things. And because I was a lawyer, I could actually give legal advice on what to do. What I realized after starting is the Self-Help Center started with some basic family law information and forms. And then as the facilitators over all the years were filling out these forms and indicating what issues people were asking, the Self-Help Center became aware of what there was, and they wanted to build content, written content for their facilitators to be able to answer these questions. And rather than right now it's a vast array of research and information on every topic you could think of. And rather than having that internally, that became the court's web page. So there's all this information out there that you would be teaching your facilitators, but it's available to the public. And that realization was pretty amazing to me. I think that's a fabulous resource, because there are a lot of people who probably have the same skills as a facilitator, and they can now go to our webpage and look at our forms and handle their case themselves. And that frees up our facilitators to help other people, because there are a lot of people who learn better by listening or hearing or discussing than reading. And so the facilitators are able to help people who call who maybe need help with that. And they will be looking at the same webpage our caller's looking at, but be able to kind of talk about it in plain language and let the person hear the information and help walk them through that. So it really helps build the contact the public sees to build content for your facilitators that you share with the public, and that becomes your page. And it's a fabulous resource. This is a picture of part of our Family Law Self-Help Center, and kind of shows the influence. So for example, property and debt for married couples, you can learn from the calls and that people are asking about that's something people have a lot of questions about. It's kind of complicated. And that's an area we can then build out because we know people are interested in that topic because they're calling and asking about it. It's the same with our forms and publications. The court has forms and publications in every area, but the self-help forms are about custody, divorce, dissolution, child support, and fraternity. All our forms are written for preferably around a 6th to 8th grade level. It's a lot of white space using plain language principles and design principles. We've always had our forms in Word so they can be modified by the user. So if a form doesn't fit, they can make the form what they need it to be. We have been exploring other options because the world is kind of transitioning and a lot of younger people are doing everything on a phone or a tablet and don't have maybe a desktop computer at home anymore or a laptop where they can, or even if they do, maybe they haven't purchased Word. So we're looking at some automated form options. And we've also always had PDFs that could be printed and written on. Most of the forms are available on the website, but what's interesting is there are some decisions made about only offering some forms through our helpline. And I think a good example of that is legal separation. In Alaska, if you want to remain married for religious or medical, or sometimes it's health insurance reasons, or just your own personal beliefs, you can get a legal separation through a court that looks just like a divorce, except you're still married. That can be really confusing for people because sometimes people think you have to get separated before you get divorced, because that's sort of a common phrase. When did you separate? And then you get a divorce. So we have forms about legal separation, but didn't put them on the web page. So if someone called the self-help center and was talking with a facilitator and it was very clear they could have a conversation and understand the difference, and that a legal separation really is a very unique circumstance, we could provide those forms to. So in some cases, we make some decisions about resources in that way. Stacy mentioned this earlier. We have a lot of different sections of the webpage now built out. This shows you a list. We've updated the debt section in the last several years and the housing section to be more robust because we found through a different process that those were also areas with a lot of self-represented litigants. So at the court system, you can go to any of these categories of or topics on self-help, and the content varies. It depends on the case type. We're most robust on family law, and then we've worked pretty hard in the last few years to build out debt and housing, because those are also areas where there's so many self-represented litigants. And some of the categories where we haven't been able to build them out as robust, we at least want to get some information there and get them links to resources and other organizations that may have more robust websites. Also links to forums, instructions for things, and often short videos. Stacy mentioned the public access computers that we have in all the courthouses, so I won't go into all the detail on that. And Stacy also mentioned our 2 classes that have now moved to Zoom. Our family law education class is taught by our facilitators, and they've done that for years. Previously in person on Fridays when the Self-Help Center was closed in Anchorage. So I think this is really one of our COVID silver linings, that we were able to move it to statewide through Zoom because it gives people throughout the state a lot more opportunities. We moved it to every other Wednesday, so the phone lines are open and can answer questions afterwards. And we chose to do a webinar feature for this class. This class has a lot higher attendance because it is court ordered. And the facilitators, when they were in person, often found that they had to, hold questions till the end, and people really wanted to stop in the middle and ask questions, and they had to kind of keep moving and then do questions at the end. And we found the webinar feature does that better. We do have a facilitator there who can answer questions at the end, and people can be typing them in during the class. And one of the nicest things about this is, in Alaska, every court has a requirement that if you're a parent of a minor child in a divorce or custody case, you have some education. And we are able to show a video that meets that education requirement at the end of this class. And prior to this, people had to go in person to their courthouse to see anything for free. The other options were all online and had a cost. So we were really excited to be able to offer that for free statewide. The hearing and trial prep class is a bit different because it's not court ordered. So it usually has fewer attendees and it's taught by an attorney rather than one of the facilitators. He wanted to choose the Zoom meeting format, and that has worked well for him because it's usually a much smaller audience and he wants to be able to interact and really take more questions because it lends itself better to answering questions during it when it's a smaller group. And he also, that's once a month, and lets the people know what the judge is going to expect. Stacy mentioned this a little too, the details presenting at testimony and evidence and what the judge is going to expect. And he has a lot of forms and packets that he can send to the parties by email afterwards, or he can mail them. But most people who are doing the Zoom meeting are doing email. Stacy mentioned new this year is our adult guardianship and conservatorship self-help line. This is similar to what we have now, but it's answering questions on adult guardianship and conservatorship petitioning, annual reports, guardian and conservator responsibilities. Like our family law, there's no legal advice. They're just giving legal information on, or also other information on resources. They can have forms and follow up in the same way. They can send things by mail or email or give information over the telephone. And they also do a similar demographic survey at the end. And they are offering 4 classes. The facilitators will be teaching 2. And then we have a staff person who's very experienced in guardianship who will be teaching 2 of the classes. And that's the flyer on the left side of the screen about that. And we are testing with the new line having voicemail because with a lot of moves to cell phones and mobile phones since the Family Law Self-Help Center opened, we're wanting to see if that has changed people's phone habits. And so but we won't have that information and feedback on that for about a year. Finally, Stacy talked about that kind of third level of hierarchy or services and mentioned our early resolution program and our modification resolution program, where after the Family Law Self-Help Center had been operating for a while, we took a next step to move and help people actually resolve their cases in the courtroom, not just help them prepare to be in the courtroom. The facilitator, as Stacy mentioned, screens every case that comes through, and there's a basic assumption that every case should have the opportunity to settle unless it has one of a few disqualifying factors, such as pretty active disqualifying domestic violence or a parent that's incarcerated. And generally, the incarceration itself isn't the factor, but we have a lot of trouble getting access to someone incarcerated by phone for a mediation or a settlement process. Or if our child protection agency is called OCS, if they're involved and there's some child protection issues that might not be appropriate. Everyone who's brought into the program either has a volunteer attorney or a court mediator or a settlement judge. And it's about 3 or 4 times each month in Anchorage, and then about once a month in a number of other, in several other places in the state. Palmer, Kenai, and Juneau are once a month. And in Anchorage, once a month, we have a child support staff person in the courtroom to help with complicated child support issues. And the staff attorney that runs the program also is pretty adept at child support. And the goal is that the folks come, they settle all their issues, all the paperwork is completed, the judge signs it, and they walk out of the courtroom with signed paperwork. Or if they can't reach an agreement, we encourage them to try to get at least some sort of interim agreement about custody or child support, or even kind of what's going to happen with property and bills and payment of things. And they could either come back later for another early resolution program hearing, or they can go to their judge, but at least maybe they have a little bit to tide them over in the meantime. And now I think it goes back to Stacy.
Okay, thanks. This is our last slide, and I just wanted to end it with some of the kind of core principles that I think are important to think about with setting up this kind of work. I strongly believe that there should be an attorney director of the self-help program, and I think they need to be part of the senior leadership team. As I mentioned earlier, I think this type of work is so integral to court operations. It shouldn't be looked at as a sideshow, but more that to inform all aspects of court operations. I also think that it's a good model to have non-attorney facilitator staff, and you hire them for their customer service skills. You can teach them the legal stuff. I know some programs think it's important to have attorney facilitators. I think you're paying too much for what you need in that situation. And so I have not chosen to have that type of model, and I wouldn't, even if I had all the money in the world. I also look at it that we're serving two primary audiences. We're serving the self-represented litigants, but we're also serving the judges, because if what you're helping the self-represented folks do doesn't work for the judges, you're not succeeding. So you need to make sure that what the work that you're doing is helping both audiences. It's also important that you, by design, only help the folks with only the information they need really at that time, and maybe the next step. So some like kind of overachieving professionals may think, oh, I'm going to teach them everything. I want to teach them A to B. I've had judges that come up with their own self-help like manuals, and they'll be like 14 pages of start to finish information about how to do your case. And I can tell you that is not going to be effective. It's overwhelming to most people. The court experience is foreign and overwhelming. And if you can just help them with what they need at that moment and tell them where they can get information about the next step or call you back, you're going to win. Provide non-legal information to go with the legal information. And I already explained why, and I'll give you just a super quick example. We might have a call from somebody that says, my husband cleaned out the bank account. I have no food to feed my kids, and I got served with a divorce complaint. Can you help me answer that divorce complaint? And we'd say, yeah, we definitely can help you, but let me give you some information right now. Can you get a pen? I want to give you the information for the food bank resources in your community. Where are you located? Do you need information about food stamps? Whatever those kind of things are to take care of their immediate practical needs. So we're going to also look for that. Look at the staff training as an ongoing experience. It's not just one and done. You get them going. The needs, of course, drop off over time. It's quite intensive in the beginning, but I learned something every day. And I learned something every day when I worked in our self-help services. And so did ours. We have staff that have been there for 20 years, and they learn every day. Do outreach widely, internally within your system so that you're the go-to resource, and externally so service providers know where to send folks. They're experiencing people with the same problems, and they want to know where to send them. And you want to know where to send people that have the problems that they serve. So do a lot of two-way, outreach. And then finally, like I've said throughout, and Jeannie, this work should inform the whole court system. It should inform your forms development, your website content. We've changed rules based on things that we've learned, processes. We created special programs. It's really a rich source of information about this user group and how you can best serve them. And thank you so much for listening to us. I know you have a full agenda, and I don't know if there's time for questions. I have to go myself in a few minutes, so I don't know if there's anything that we can help you with further.
Well, Stacy, Jeannie, thank you so much. You all are doing incredible work. I do want, does anyone have any questions? Let me just start with a question. How many people work in the statewide self-help division? Since we are in the process, thanks to the self-help director at my court, which is the largest court in the state, and John Grecian, we're starting the process of developing potentially a statewide self-help division. And so how many people work in yours, given your size of the state and population you serve?
Go ahead, Jeannie.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have 4 phone line facilitators addressing family law. And we have 2 phone line facilitators addressing guardianship. They're non-attorneys. Most related to family law, we also have myself, who's an attorney, and 2 staff attorneys. One of them runs all the dispute resolution programs, which are maybe a little bit down the line. We have a lot of mediation programs for family law, guardianship, adult guardianship, minor guardianship, and our dependency cases that are called child in need of aid. And then a staff attorney who runs that early resolution program I talked to you about. We have a staff person who's a non-lawyer who runs all the language access. We have a forms attorney and 2 forms staff. We have a access to justice tech person who's a non-lawyer, but it previously was a lawyer. And we have the head of the state jury office, which is something we choose to put under access to justice. And then we have one admin assistant who helps.
But I do want to say that when the center got started, there was 2 facilitators and 1 director. And so there's been this buildup over time. And as we could demonstrate the need with those surveys of how many people we're serving, we also were able to tell how many people we weren't serving through our 800 phone number of people who never got through. So that over time, and having 4 facilitators has been a pretty good fit, where I feel like we're doing a pretty good job. I am going to have to leave like in 1 minute, but I wanted to answer one of the quick questions because it's an important one that I saw came in the chat, was how do we fund this? So it's part of our statewide budget, but one of the main sources that you should be thinking about, at least for family law, is 4D funding. And there's a paper that I can send a reference that the Self-Represented Litigation Network put out, but 4D funding is money that comes from the federal government as a pass-through to courts for processing basically child support cases. So if you have a nexus to child support and self-help, they changed the regulations in 2018 to include self-help, you can get reimbursed 66% of the position that is doing the 4D related work. So our family law facilitator positions are basically reimbursed at a very high rate. We're able through our survey to tell how much of the work is connected to this 4D funding, and then we're able to get 66% of that reimbursed. So that's really important, and to do the right timekeeping is really important because that's a great source of funding, and we're able to expand more positions that do that kind of work because we know we have that ready funding source. And then the rest of the funding comes out of my operating budget as just an important line item. And I am sorry, I have to be in another meeting right now, so I'm going to jump off, and Jeannie, you can answer the rest. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Take care. You're welcome back in New Mexico.
I also have another meeting, but I could stay for another minute or two.
There is one question in the chat from Mr. Abeda.
About outreach to Indigenous populations. So we do a lot of outreach to everyone, and for a related project, a grant we have a steering committee, and so the attorney staff, like in my position, we try to get to know the community. We work closely with Alaska Legal Services Corporation and have a lot of relationships with them. And then there's a financial alliance in town, and we contacted them and we started going to those meetings. There's a housing alliance group that's all social services groups, and we go to them, and Alaska Legal Services knows about a lot of these groups and can help tell you who they are. So we also have a lot of projects where we work with the Alaska Native Justice Center. So it's outreach to the organizations, the social services organizations, and trying to have an access to justice sort of web in our community. And we let them know we're here for them too. So for example, we're working on a full faith and credit grant, a federal grant in Alaska to try to ensure that domestic violence protective orders from tribal courts are recognized statewide by Department of Public Safety, Department of Law, and the courts. So through this grant, we've gotten to know a lot of people, and the Native community, the tribal courts asked the state court, they asked us, could we have copies of all your domestic violence forms in Word so we can use those to help make some of our own forms, so that when the Department of Public Safety gets it, a trooper or a police officer, it looks very similar. And we were like, sure. We sent them all the Word forms, and we told our forms attorney every time we're update, we'll send them to this one key person at the tribal courts again. So we're building relationships in that way. But it really, I think, at your highest level takes outreach and just getting to know who your people are in your community, who your social service groups are, and going to those meetings and becoming a partner.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate all the work you're doing and for giving us this presentation today. Please take care, and we will definitely be in touch.